You talked about a conversation with the people. Could you just expand upon that?
I think that people really want this election campaign to be one that's conducted in the sitting rooms of Britain with politicians talking to a dozen people rather than addressing mass rallies of 15,000. They want substance rather than slogans.
Looking at the slogan you have, we're having a bit of debate about it, and the advert, would you say that's a bit negative?
I think it's going to give people a bit of a smile. I mean, millions of people watched Ashes to Ashes last night. I did. And I think that they'll see the Audi Quattro, they'll remember DCI Hunt, and they'll think, well, hang on, do we really want to go back to that? And I think that when you go through the substance of the choice that people have, it's a very, very fundamental one, because Britain has changed a lot in the last 13 years, and in employment, in housing, in health and in education. There is provision and opportunities that never existed 13 years ago.
But there are also maybe people here in South Wales and East Thurrock who remember the 80s and say, hey, that gave me a lot of opportunities. It gave me an opportunity to buy my house, didn't it? People down in Essex believe the 80s was the epitome of freedom in their lives.
Well, it was an important step to allow people to own their own houses, and no one's proposing to reverse that. But the question now is, how do we build on that? How do we have a stable housing market in the future? How do we have a stable economy in the future? Because whether you're renting your house or owning your house, if you've got 15% interest rates, which is what we did have in the 80s, then there's trouble around the corner. We've got 2.5% interest rates today by choice, not by
experience that the Labour have gained over the last number of years. Is that important?
I think experience is important, but we know the challenges are different. And we know that since the global economic crisis that we've seen, we've got to react differently. We've got to build more of a manufacturing base in this country. We're the 6th biggest manufacturer in the world. We've got to do more. We've got to guarantee jobs for young people. And that's something that we've made clear that we will do and the Conservatives won't. So the challenges are different. The challenge of climate change is a much bigger one than it was 10 or 15 years ago. The challenges are different, but our values remain the same. And I don't think people want to go back. I think people want to look forward, and I think people are optimistic about Britain. I think people think a return to some of the things we saw in the 1980s isn't where they want to go.
George Osborne in The Guardian today said that the national insurance argument has wiped out 15 years of hard work Labour have done with businesses. Do you agree?
I don't agree with that, and actually what George Osborne has said is significant. He says he'll have an emergency budget within 50 days and he'll cut £6.5 billion from public spending, and that would threaten the recovery. And there is no question about that. We know from eminent economists and others that that is a threat to the recovery. And that is the biggest issue that we face, which is we face the deep recession, we're coming out of it, we've got to try and maintain it, and then we've got to build the economy of the future.
I get the feeling that what you're saying here is that your work isn't finished. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. I've been a very hard-working MP, as you know, for the last 13 years, and there's more to do. Now, I don't know if there'll ever be a point where I can say, job done, and want to walk away. I want to carry on doing the job, and that's what I'll be fighting to do.
This may be a question for another party, but over the last month we've had 7 senior Labour figures in both constituencies and only 1 Tory. Is that a question for yourselves or a question for them?
I tell you one thing that's surprised me about the Tories and the campaign. They're taking this for granted. And one thing you know about this constituency is never take it for granted. The only vote that counts is one on election day. The Tories have been telling me they're going to get rid of me since the day I was elected. They have to fight hard to do so.
Thank you.
Very good.